The Galactic Council's chamber buzzed with quiet confidence as its delegates gathered to discuss their latest conquest, Earth. Representatives from countless alien species, each unique in appearance and culture, filled the grand circular hall, their collective attention fixed on the discussion at hand. Among them, a reptilian delegate sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Humans," he scoffed. "A primitive species from a backwater planet. They can't even achieve interstellar travel without help. Subjugating them will be a formality. Nothing more." A ripple of agreement spread through the room. Another voice joined in, this time from an insected creature whose words came out like a series of clicking whispers. "Their resources will be useful to the Empire. They'll comply, like all lesser species do, when faced with our might." It was more of a logistical conversation than a strategic one. The council members treated Earth like just another insignificant planet to be annexed, another resource to add to their growing empire. Conquest wasn't a question of if, but how quickly. "We should make an example of them," suggested another, a member of a psychic species, his tone casual yet commanding. "Show the galaxy what happens when a species resists the Council's will. They'll bend or break." The decision was made with little further debate. An emissary's ship would be sent to Earth, carrying negotiators backed by a subtle display of technological superiority, a clear message wrapped in diplomacy. The Council prepared to deliver its ultimatum, certain of humanity's swift and inevitable submission. The emissary's ship, a gleaming, colossal construct of metal and light, descended through Earth's atmosphere with effortless grace. To the human eye, it was a wonder of alien engineering, cutting through the clouds like a knife. On board, the emissaries, each a representative of their species, reviewed the Council's instructions, to remain assertive, to speak as though their demands left no room for debate, to remind the humans who held the true power. The ship touched down on Earth with all the grandeur one would expect from an advanced civilization. The emissaries stepped out, expecting fear, awe, or perhaps defiance. What they were met with, however, was neither. Instead, a group of Earth's leaders stood waiting, calm and composed, as though they had prepared for this moment. There was no panic, no chaos, just quiet, focused anticipation. A holographic projection of the lead alien envoy materialized, his imposing figure towering over the humans. His voice resonated with a practiced authority. "People of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council. Your planet has been deemed a suitable addition to our empire. You will surrender your sovereignty and integrate into our structure, or you will face the consequences of defiance. Choose wisely, for we offer peace and prosperity." The humans listened, and when one of their representatives finally spoke, the response was measured, almost disarmingly calm. "We appreciate your offer," the human said, maintaining a neutral tone. "We are open to discussing terms for a peaceful dialogue." For a moment, the emissaries hesitated. This was not the reaction they had anticipated. Most species, upon first contact with the Council, either resisted with fear or crumbled in submission. But these humans, they seemed oddly relaxed, too composed for a species supposedly unaware of what they faced. The lead envoy mistook this for weakness. He reiterated the Council's conditions, making sure to emphasize the consequences of defiance with increasing clarity, each word carrying an implied threat. The humans didn't flinch. They nodded politely and agreed to a formal meeting, the kind of response that left the emissaries feeling as though they had already secured victory. Satisfied with the interaction, the emissary's ship departed, sending an initial report back to the Council. "Humans appear compliant. Initial interactions suggest readiness to submit. Recommend proceeding with full integration process." Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the mood was triumphant. There was little doubt in their minds that Earth would fall in line like all the others. The next steps were discussed as though the conquest was already complete, establishing bases, deploying overseers, and integrating Earth's resources into the greater empire. "They're just like the rest," one council member remarked with an air of certainty. "All species are the same. They resist until they see the futility, then they fall in line." Another voice chimed in, this one dripping with self-satisfaction. "We'll make sure they understand that compliance is not only expected, It's mandatory. The council members leaned back in their seats, content with the day's work. The emissary's report had given them everything they needed to proceed, and with Earth seemingly ready to capitulate, the conversation turned to more administrative concerns. They spoke not of strategies or contingencies, but logistics, fleet movements, resource distribution, and the inevitable annexation of Earth. As their discussion wrapped up, one council member casually asked, "And if they resist after the meeting?" There was a brief chuckle from the others. "Then we crush them," another replied with a dismissive wave of his hand. "It won't come to that. By the end of negotiations, they'll know their place." Back on Earth, beneath the surface where the Galactic Council's emissaries couldn't see, the true preparations were underway. In a hidden facility, Earth's leaders gathered, the atmosphere tense but filled with quiet determination. These weren't just political figures. They represented a coalition of the brightest minds, military tacticians, and scientists, all working for a shadow organization known simply as the Veil. For centuries, the Veil had been watching, waiting, and preparing for this exact moment. Earth had long known of the Galactic Council. Early space probes had intercepted signals, small fragments of communication that hinted at a vast, ancient empire expanding across the galaxy. Instead of panic, humanity responded with caution. The public remained unaware, while secret operations were launched to gather as much information as possible. What the Council didn't know was that humanity had been covertly expanding its reach into deep space. Not in the flashy, obvious way other species had, but in a methodical, calculated manner. There were hidden colonies, research stations on the edges of known space, and quiet alliances with other species that had managed to escape the Council's reach. The Veil had reverse-engineered technology from intercepted alien communications, quietly building Earth's defenses while keeping the rest of the world in the dark. They weren't preparing for open war, they were preparing for something far more effective: psychological warfare. They knew the Council's arrogance would be their downfall. A holographic display flickered to life in the underground chamber, showing the trajectory of the emissary's ship as it returned to the Galactic Council's fleet. Earth's leaders stood around the table, observing the ship's every movement. They knew the Council believed Earth was already falling in line, a prey waiting to be devoured. It was precisely the miscalculation humanity had been counting on. One of the leaders, a seasoned strategist, broke the silence. "They think we're going to comply. They've already sent word back, assuming we're willing to submit." Another figure, older but sharp-eyed, smiled faintly. "Good. Let them think that. It'll make our next move much easier." A scientist seated further back in the room spoke up, adjusting his glasses as he scanned the data streaming across his screen. "We've gathered enough intel on their technology. Impressive, sure, but far from invincible. If we strike at the right moments, we'll have the upper hand." The room was filled with quiet confidence. These people weren't caught off guard by the alien presence. They had been preparing for this for generations. When the Council scouts first made contact with Earth, long before the emissary arrived, humanity had already begun analyzing their technology. They had intercepted signals, reverse-engineered what little they could, and adapted it to their own systems. And now, as the Council believed Earth was compliant, the Veil was setting the stage for a much larger play. One of the military officers in the room leaned forward, arms crossed. "If their tech is as vulnerable as it looks, we'll neutralize them before they even realize what's happening. But we need to be careful. This isn't about a full-on fight. The goal is to disable, disorient, and gain the psychological edge. We've been underestimated before," a senior leader remarked dryly, glancing around the room. "But this time we're ready." The Veil's strategy was simple: deceive the Council into believing Earth was defenseless, lure them into a false sense of security, and then strike with precision. Not through brute force, but through calculated sabotage. Earth's leaders knew that the Council's strength lay in its reputation. If they could break that image without launching a full-scale war, the Council would be forced to negotiate on Earth's terms. They had studied the Council's methods. In every conquest, the Council relied on the same tactics: overwhelming displays of force, psychological dominance, and swift subjugation. But humanity wasn't playing by those rules. From the start, Earth had prepared for the Council to view them as weak. The entire facade of human submission was a ploy, designed to make the Council lower its guard. Earth's real strength wasn't in its fleets or weapons, it was in its ability to adapt, observe, and wait for the right moment. The Veil had no intention of playing by the Council's game. Instead, they had created their own, and the Council was walking right into it. One of the younger leaders, tasked with overseeing Earth's covert space operations, spoke up. Our hidden colonies on the fringes of their controlled space have been gathering data for years. We've pinpointed several weaknesses in their communication systems. When the time comes, we can exploit those without them realizing it. The older leader, still smiling faintly, nodded. The key to this operation isn't to fight them head-on. It's to cripple them quietly, disable their systems, and force them to negotiate before they even understand what happened. We aren't seeking war. We're seeking control of the narrative. There was no grand speech, no rallying cry for battle. The room remained focused, each leader already knowing their role in the coming days. There was a clear understanding. This was a game of patience, of quiet strategy. The Council was about to learn that the humans they considered primitive had been watching, learning, and growing stronger in the shadows. The session ended with a brief exchange of final instructions. The leaders of the Veil dispersed, their next moves already in motion. They had what they needed. The Council believed Earth was compliant. It was exactly what they had hoped for. As Earth's hidden networks buzzed with activity, preparations were quietly underway. Soon, the Council would realize their mistake, but by then, it would be too late. The Galactic Council's fleet arrived in orbit, casting massive shadows across Earth's surface. Thousands of warships, each bristling with advanced weapons, descended into position. From the Council's perspective, it was an overwhelming show of force, a message to anyone who dared challenge their supremacy. To Earth's populace, it seemed as though the heavens themselves had been darkened by these alien invaders. But despite the spectacle, Earth's leadership remained eerily calm. The Council sent down its scouts, small detachments of soldiers and engineers tasked with securing key points on the planet. Their mission was clear: assess the situation, establish command centers, and prepare for full integration. To the aliens, it all felt routine. Earth appeared docile, just as expected. The humans showed no signs of aggression, allowing themselves to be guided and observed. But this perceived compliance was all part of the plan. As the Council scouts spread across the globe, they began to encounter subtle oddities. Human officials, always polite and cooperative, escorted them to specific locations, granting access to key infrastructure with no resistance. This openness should have raised alarms, but the Council's arrogance blinded them. They assumed this ease was the result of Earth's fear and acceptance of their fate. What the Council didn't realize was that every move had been orchestrated by the humans. The data they allowed the aliens to collect was precisely what they wanted them to see: information designed to mislead, to suggest Earth's systems were primitive and easy to manipulate. Every piece of intelligence the scouts gathered had been curated by the Veil to paint a picture of Earth's vulnerability, leading the Council further into their trap. The turning point came without warning. One by one, the Council's advanced systems began to fail. Scout ships hovering just above the surface suddenly lost power, dropping to the ground with no explanation. Communication arrays that had been established to coordinate the planetary takeover flickered out of existence, leaving the Council's forces blind and cut off from each other. Command centers, set up meticulously by the Council's engineers, began to malfunction, their systems shutting down in rapid succession. Panic spread quickly among the Council's ground teams. They scrambled to diagnose the failures, but every attempt was met with confusion. The technology they had relied on for millennia, flawless in their conquests of other worlds, was crumbling in their hands. What they couldn't understand was how. How had this primitive species, one that hadn't even mastered interstellar travel, managed to so thoroughly disrupt their operations? Back on the Council's main command ship, the situation was deteriorating. Reports from the surface were erratic, with captains and ground commanders calling for immediate reinforcements, unable to comprehend what was happening. The Council commander, normally composed, was now shouting orders, his voice edged with frustration. "Status report," he demanded, his tone sharp with panic. "What is happening down there?" One of his officers, pale and wide-eyed, replied. "Sir, they're shutting us down. Our systems are going offline one after another. We can't locate the source." As the Council's forces descended further into chaos, the humans made their move. For the first time, they revealed the extent of their preparations. From hidden silos, buried deep beneath the Earth's surface, advanced defense systems activated. But these weren't massive weapons meant to wage war. Instead, they were precision tools, designed to dismantle the Council's technology with surgical accuracy. Turrets emerged from the ground, not to fire upon the Council's soldiers but to disable their vehicles and drones with electromagnetic pulses, rendering them useless. The humans had no intention of engaging in open combat. They didn't need to. Their knowledge of the Council's systems, gathered over years of covert study, allowed them to strike at the weakest points. And they did so with a level of precision that left the Council's forces paralyzed. The alien soldiers, once confident in their dominance, now found themselves stranded. Their vehicles were dead, their weapons unresponsive, and their communications severed. What had begun as a routine annexation had turned into a nightmare, and they had no idea how to counter it. In the midst of the chaos, a single transmission cut through the Council's failing communication network. It was from Earth. The same calm voice that had greeted the emissaries now returned, but this time, the tone had shifted. There was no deference, no diplomacy, only quiet authority. "Galactic Council," the voice began. "We have allowed you to proceed this far to understand the threat you pose. You came to subjugate us, but you underestimated us. This is not an act of war. It is a demonstration. Your technology is impressive, but it is not invulnerable. You have no control here. We are not your prey." For the first time, the Council's commanders began to understand the depth of their miscalculation. The humans hadn't resisted because they were weak, they had played along, watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, as the Council's forces floundered, humanity was revealing the truth. They had been preparing for this confrontation for far longer than the Council had ever imagined. On the Council's flagship, the senior commander felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. "How could this be possible?" he muttered, more to himself than to his officers. "They had no access to our systems, no knowledge of our technology. They must have stolen it, copied it from another species." But before he could continue, the human voice cut in again, as though answering his thoughts. "You assumed we were weak because we did not reveal our strength. You assumed we were ignorant because we did not flaunt our knowledge. That was your mistake. We did not steal your technology. We studied it. We improved it." The commander stared at the communication screen in stunned silence. The humans had played them perfectly, using the Council's arrogance against them. All this time, they had been building a defense that the Council couldn't have anticipated. And now, their entire operation was falling apart. "You came here expecting to control us," the human voice continued. "But now you see that you are the ones who have lost control." The transmission ended, leaving the Council to face the reality of their failure. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. Humanity wasn't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. They were predators, quietly watching, biding their time, and now, the Council was trapped in their web. The Galactic Council's command ship remained in stunned silence after the transmission ended. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they found themselves in an unfamiliar position, vulnerable. The usual protocols of domination had failed spectacularly. Earth, a planet they had believed to be insignificant and easily subdued, had outmaneuvered them in ways they had never imagined. The senior commander, once brimming with confidence, now struggled to regain composure. He barked orders at his officers, demanding status reports and solutions, but none came. Their systems were still crippled, their communication lines barely operational. Every effort to re-establish control over their forces on the ground was met with failure. They were at the mercy of an enemy they had grossly underestimated. It wasn't just their technology that had been compromised. Their entire strategy had been dismantled before it even began. The humans hadn't simply outsmarted them, they had anticipated every move the Council would make, exploiting weaknesses in ways that made the aliens realize just how thoroughly they had been played. As the Council scrambled to respond, another transmission came through. This time, there was no delay in opening the channel. The same human voice, calm, composed, and now carrying an unmistakable authority, filled the command deck. "Galactic Council," the voice said. "By now, you understand the situation. You are not in control here. Your forces are immobilized. We have neutralized your technology, your communications, and your ability to wage war against us." The human didn't sound triumphant or boastful. There was no need for that. The facts were self-evident. The Council had come to Earth believing it would be an easy victory, only to find that their perceived prey had been quietly preparing for this moment all along. The senior commander, his tone less certain now, responded. "You think you can challenge the might of the Council? You believe this display of defiance will be tolerated?" The human voice was unwavering. "We are not challenging your might. We are showing you that your assumptions about us were wrong. You believed we would bow to your threats, but we have been studying you for years. We knew what you would bring, and we prepared accordingly." The Council's commanders exchanged nervous glances. They had never encountered a species so well prepared, so adept at turning the Council's own strengths into weaknesses. The realization that they were not just facing a simple rebellion, but a calculated and precise strategy, began to sink in. "You assume that we seek war," the human continued. "We do not. But we will not submit to you. You came here with the intent to dominate, to force us into compliance. That is not an option." The tension in the command deck was palpable. The Council's leaders had never been spoken to like this before, certainly not by a species they had deemed inferior. But there was no denying the situation. Earth had the upper hand, and it wasn't just through brute force. They had used the Council's arrogance against them, turning what should have been a swift conquest into a humiliating failure. "We are offering you a way out," the human voice said, the tone direct but not without a measure of finality. "Withdraw your forces. We will agree to a peaceful coexistence, but only as equals. Earth will not be part of your empire." The senior commander's voice wavered, trying to salvage some semblance of authority. "You cannot expect us to walk away from this. We are the Council. We control the galaxy." "Perhaps you do," the human replied. "But not here. Not today." The silence that followed was suffocating. The Council's forces had no way to strike back. Their technology, which they had relied on to subjugate countless other worlds, was useless against a foe that had clearly studied and improved upon their systems. And now, they were faced with a choice they had never imagined, a negotiated settlement with a species they had considered beneath them. "Very well," the senior commander finally said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We will withdraw, for now. But know this, the Council does not forget. This will not be the end." The human's response was calm, almost indifferent. "We understand your need to save face. But be clear, this is not a temporary victory. We have shown you what we are capable of. Should you return, we will be even more prepared. You may control other worlds, but Earth will never be one of them." With that, the transmission ended. The command deck fell into a hushed silence once more, as the reality of their situation began to fully take hold. The Galactic Council, rulers of countless star systems, had been forced into a retreat. Not through overwhelming military might, but through precision, strategy, and patience, a type of resistance they had never encountered. The order was given for the fleet to begin its withdrawal. Ships that had arrived in triumph now turned away from Earth in defeat. As they left Earth's orbit, the Council's commanders were left grappling with an uncomfortable truth: they had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, they had exposed their own vulnerabilities. The human voice, calm and confident, lingered in their minds. It wasn't just about the loss of control over Earth. The Council now had to contend with the fact that they were not as invincible as they had believed. If Earth, a planet they had once considered insignificant, could stand against them, what other worlds might follow suit? As the Council's fleet vanished into the darkness of space, back on Earth, the humans stood firm. They had revealed their strength, not through arrogance or displays of force, but through knowledge, strategy, and resilience. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. In the end, the Council hadn't encountered a simple planet ripe for domination. They had faced a species that had learned, adapted, and prepared for this exact moment. And as they withdrew, they knew that Earth was not just another world to conquer, it was a force to be reckoned with. Humanity, the supposed prey, had shown its true nature. Not through aggression or submission, but as the apex predators they had always been. The galaxy would never forget the day they had crossed paths with Earth, and lost.